Forests provide us with raw materials, enhance biological diversity, and help protect the climate. But our forests are at risk. They're threatened by climate change and are ruthlessly exploited by industry and illegal logging. But some foresters and activists who want to preserve our woodlands are taking a different approach. The city of Lübeck in northwestern Germany has owned a communal forest for hundreds of years. For the past 3 decades, the forest has been maintained using what's called a close-to-nature approach. It's a departure from what has become standard forestry practice in Germany, but forester Knut Storm is making it work.
What we do differently? We have a lot of patience and let nature take its course. When you try to speed things up and make everything grow bigger, taller, faster, the local ecosystem suffers. That's exactly what foresters are doing. Their goal is to have trees grow as quickly as possible so that they can harvest as much wood as possible in the shortest amount of time.
Knut Storm believes that nature knows best. His approach has detractors, but he gets results. The trees here are largely free of bark beetles, and there's little damage due to drought. In other places, large areas of woodland have been clear-cut due to beetle infestations.
Foresters are making the same mistake they made in 1990 and in the years after the storms. We tried to get rid of capsized trees and get everything growing again as quickly as possible. But anytime you remove a tree, you get more sun shining in. Then you're vulnerable to wood-boring beetles. You've created the problem yourself. Managing the forest that way leads to infestations, and it's pointless. Where there's an infestation, you won't earn a thing.
In the Lübeck forest, the small handful of dead trees that were infested by bark beetles aren't felled. Knut Storm's colleague Jörg Besko explains.
These are tunnels and chambers made by beetles, but the beetles are long gone. These trees pose no threat to the forest.
They're useful.
There are good bugs in there.
Good bugs, like insects that prey on bark beetles.
When we have problems with bark beetles, we try to find the trees with fresh infestations. Those we remove, but the ones nearby are left standing. That way we don't have any gaps.
There aren't many trees with an active bark beetle infestation in this forest. The 2 foresters are searching near a fallen tree. The dog Lina helps.
It's possible that some beetles have landed on a nearby tree. One sign is when there's resin flowing out. But we can't say for sure. Usually it would be a bit further up, so we'd have to take the tree down. Should we? Mr. Hagemeister is coming with the chainsaw, and we'll take a look.
The trees here are ready for market and would have been felled anyway. It's a good opportunity to see if there are bark beetles here.
Achtung! Doch, jawohl, wunderbar.
The 2 foresters head over to take a look, but don't find any signs of bark beetles.
Da ist nix. Da ist nix. Nee, ne?
Check 5 meters further up. There are no bark beetles down here, no tunnels, nothing. Those trees over there, if we checked them, we'd find tunnels under the bark from old infestations. That's what we were looking for, but the woodpeckers probably finished them off.
When they do find bark beetles, they treat the trees right away.
We don't use chemicals or anything like that. We strip off the bark. They feed and breed between the bark and the wood, so removing the bark destroys their breeding ground.
Many other forestry outfits treat the felled trees with pesticides to kill the larvae. In this forest, dead trees that were once infested aren't removed.
Those trees that you see over there would be cut down by most any other forestry operation in Germany. We leave them standing because they still provide shade. And when they do fall on their own, they supply what's called coarse woody debris. Even when it's fairly dry, this here's like a sponge. So when it gets really hot and sunny, this debris helps keep things cool. That's why forests are basically nature's refrigerators. This woody debris is very important, especially during hot and dry spells.
The decaying wood is also important for new growth.
In an ordinary year, it doesn't matter much because the soil has enough water in it. But in years where there's a serious drought, this dead wood breaks down and becomes humus, and the water is released. That helps the little saplings survive the drought. The soil may be dry, but the wood debris is still moist.
Knut Storm believes that diverse forests where nature takes its course are more resistant to climate change. But others disagree. They believe that fast-growing conifers store more CO2 and make more money. Forestry management that prioritizes fast growth and quick yields is standard across much of Europe. The Massif Central region in south-central France is no exception. But here, too, there are people who are bucking the trend. Pierre Demago and his wife, Susanne Braun, have founded a forestry collective that encompasses 400 hectares of woodland. Today, they're relocating young saplings and replanting them.
In a forest, certain species of trees, like linden and fir trees, serve as a kind of alkaline pump. They have deep roots, which help funnel certain nutrients back towards the surface. That helps sustain other plant and tree species. Little things like that can make a big difference.
In this part of France, forests are treated like an agricultural product, and fast growth cycles are encouraged.
Once you've filled the hole with soil, then you gently put your feet around the sapling and give it a little tug. That way you give the roots some air and breathing space, which helps them develop.
Local saplings are already adapted to local climate conditions. Saplings grown in industrial nurseries are not. But that's not the only problem.
The problem with trees from a nursery is that they've been treated with so many fertilizers and pesticides. Nursery saplings are like candy for local animal species. Deer, for example. Our wild saplings are tougher and not as sugary.
The mix of species also makes the woodland more resistant to storms.
If you only plant one type of tree that grows quickly, trees that are very tall and thin and spindly, they're a bit like a pencil. When there's a big storm, they topple like dominoes. Planting some deciduous trees or other species in between the very tall trees gives you a second level, a second line of defense. Then the entire woodland is more resilient.
Mixed forests with a diversity of species are rare in France, and that's also true of Germany.
40 years ago, when I went to university, we were already being taught that the best forests are mixed forests with a variety of species. Today, we've only managed to accomplish that in 2.6% of our forests. In school, that would get you a failing grade. It's a scandal, really. A massive policy failure.
It's no different here in south-central France, but Susanna and Pierre are determined to do things differently.
This plot of woodland is basically what we're trying to achieve. It's rich, diverse, and nature is renewing itself. We have really nice diversity here, multi-layered with many different phases of growth and decay. There's plenty of woody debris and lots of microhabitats. I'm proud of this. I used my expertise to help kick off this process, and nature did the rest. This is what a forest should look like. I'm a member of Greenpeace, and we're fighting against deforestation and illegal timber imports. The problem is that we do need wood. I'd rather draw on our own forests here in France, but I don't want to exploit them to the point of destruction.
In Romania, rapacious logging practices are the order of the day. The country exports huge amounts of illegally logged timber. Even the government admits it's a major problem. The Carpathian Mountains are still blanketed in forests, but they're disappearing at an alarming rate. Johannes Tsanen of the Worldwide Fund for Nature wants to change that.
There are many reasons we have to combat this illegal logging and deforestation here. It's a threat to our very survival.
It's a problem that's particularly severe in Eastern Europe, and poverty is just one of the reasons.
We are seeing everything from poor people collecting firewood for the winter to organized crime networks and major corporate structures that feed off illegal timber.
Organized crime is a big problem in the Carpathians. The trade in illegal lumber is a lucrative business. Profit margins are high, the penalties low, and the police can often be bribed. The Worldwide Fund for Nature wants to clamp down on the timber mafia.
We're facing a tough opponent. It won't be easy.
Anyone here who tries to protect the forests is taking a risk, and they get little support from local authorities. 2 foresters were killed here not long ago.
We're exploring new ways to protect the forests. For example, we're working with an EU project that aims to educate the judiciary, state prosecutors, and the police, and show them that illegal clear-cutting is more than just a trivial offense.
Dima is from the Carpathian region of Ukraine and a veteran in the battle against illegal logging there. He's come here to support Johannes Tsanen.
There are similar patterns with organized crime and illegal logging and people who are trying to protect the forest. For example, in Ukraine, we had an occasion in the Carpathians when a local activist was talking about the illegal logging, was showing to journalists the place where illegal logging was very severe and systematic. Right at that time, illegal loggers came to his house and just set up in fire his house. I think to stop illegal logging on the international level, we need better level of interagency and international cooperation.
Organized crime is already working cross-border. They are established. This is a well-established network. And what we try to start here is to build up a network of authorities. And the bridge builder will be Interpol to help these authorities to become more effective cross-border.
Interpol headquarters in Lyon began investigating the illegal international timber trade about 10 years ago. Sascha Braun is chief investigator of the Forestry Crime Unit.
We have to understand that in our globalized world, when consumers buy cheap wood in a Western European supermarket, that might lead to someone being killed in a forest in Eastern Europe.
Clear cutting is also an increasing problem in France, but here it's done legally. Up to 25 hectares can be felled in one go, an area about the size of 25 soccer fields.
There's the neighbor's clear cut. What a mess. When we bought our woodland 5 years ago, this was covered in fir trees. You can see from the stumps that they were huge, up to 80 centimeters in diameter. They were just 60 years old. Last winter, they took them all down.
Susanna Braun isn't placing blame. Clear-cutting is an accepted practice here.
For many forest owners, that's all they know, and they often get bad advice. When the trees are mature, they think they need to be harvested. Otherwise, it's like letting an apple rot on the branch. But actually, it's fine if trees grow to be 200 or 300 years old.
It's also a political issue. The timber industry employs more people here than the car industry.
It's true. We're industrializing our forests, standardizing them, along the model of a monoculture. We use large machinery and produce trees that are completely uniform, so they're easier to put through the sawmill. What we'll end up with is uniform, standardized forests that are the complete opposite of natural biodiversity.
It's the same with industrialized new-growth forests in Germany. In Lübeck, Knut Storm advocates for diverse, species-rich forests. His detractors say that's not economically viable, but Storm's forest does turn a profit for the city.
I'm not asking for everyone to sing our praise. But even if they don't agree with our approach, they should leave us be. Instead, they act like they need to save the city of Lübeck from our foolishness.
Detractors say his sustainable forest management is a fiction and regularly file complaints with the city administration. The complaints haven't succeeded, but they're not giving up. The city supports Knut Storm's work. Today, he has an appointment with his boss, the city's Interior and Environment Minister.
The wet dog means you've been in the woods today.
Ludgar Hinsen brushes off complaints about the forest. The 5,000-hectare woodland is turning a profit, and a sustainable one.
I'm happy to invite critics to Lübeck so they can see for themselves what we're doing. Everyone who's planted fast-growing trees in recent years is now seeing how an ordinary forest fire can destroy many hectares of woodland overnight. It's a bit crazy that they're planning to replant and make the same mistake all over again. A forest needs time to mature.
The two are also critical of Germany's federal forestry policies. Storm says the Agriculture Ministry's plans are misguided, especially because they call for removing woody debris and planting more single-species coniferous forests.
When it comes to serving the public interest, forests aren't the same as agricultural land. Forests also play an important environmental role. Forest management should fall under the Environment Ministry, not the Ministry of Agriculture, even if many foresters nowadays see themselves simply as farmers of trees.
Storm is critical of forestry practices in Germany, but nature conservation is still more valued here than in many other countries. Finland is one example. The Nordic nation advertises its forests as a tourist attraction, but appearances can be deceiving. Europe's last indigenous people, the Sami, live from reindeer herding. The animals graze in the forests, but many young reindeer herders like Josse are watching these woodlands disappear.
I respect the reindeer as a survivor in the north. And I feel happy when I see them and feel lucky for myself to be born in this culture.
Their culture is under threat. Finland's forests are being clear-cut to produce things like toilet paper.
For the reindeer herder, the reindeer is the most important thing. We take care of them and keep them alive so they can take care of us and keep us alive.
Sami settlements stretch across the north of Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and into the far west of Russia. About 10,000 Sami live in Finland today. The The families share grazing areas for their reindeer. In the winter, the reindeer are returned to the corrals and counted.
This circle is called kirnu. Here we catch the reindeer and we separate them to these boxes all around us, depending what family reindeer they are.
It's an age-old Sami tradition that's still being observed by young herders like Josse.
The people have inhabited these lands for after end of the Ice Age.
That's how long the herds have been here too. But nowadays, the forests belong to the Finnish government, and the government began selling large stretches of forest land into private ownership back in the 1960s. Today's owners are out to make a profit, but felling trees in this remote region is complicated and expensive. The Finnish government provides a subsidy. That's the only way owners can turn a profit while selling their timber at rock-bottom prices to the paper industry. The Sami object to this practice, but they're ignored. Josse has teamed up with another activist, Jarmo, to change that.
They have taken so much from us and leave the garbage to us that it has to stop.
This area was once a diverse, species-rich primeval forest. Under EU law, it was supposed to be protected. Instead, it was clear-cut. For the reindeer herders, it's a disaster, and vulnerable species are also affected.
Of course, it makes me sad to see this. There's no use for us, or this forest doesn't give us anything. The wood is only taken away and the minuses are left here. Yeah, the reindeer can't use this land at all. They just go through it or go around it, but it won't stay here.
The wood pulp is used to make paper, one of the linchpins of Finland's economy. There's hardly any oversight over which forests are being felled, and any complaints are systematically ignored.
If the state doesn't act properly, if the companies don't care, somebody has to care.
They're convinced that what the timber industry is doing is illegal, but proving that is another matter.
Sami people have been born to fight for their rights. There is so many cases in Sami history that the government and Sami people have made an agreement, but then the state or somebody is violating the agreement.
Yeah.
That has to change. We just want to be and want to live like traditionally in a modern world.
It takes courage to demonstrate against the violation of agreements and draw attention to illegal clear-cutting. People who speak out face public hostility. Paper from Finland is inexpensive, and many European companies would rather buy it than use recycled paper. Knut Sturm is also dismayed by this waste of valuable resources.
What wood do we really need to use? And where could we use something else? Packaging, paper, and wood fuel. Cutting down on that would probably allow us to reduce logging by about 60%.
Jarmo would like to see foresters in Finland take that same approach. Then the Sami would be spared this struggle for their way of life.
I guess you know this person. Because of the opposition coming from the herders, the state has decided that it won't log those certain areas where the herders, Sami reindeer herders, don't accept loggings. On the other hand, there are some large forest commons which just go on logging in those forests where also the herders haven't given their consent.
Sami people in Finland have taken to social media to call for help and denounce the timber industry.
They joined the fight. She's from New Zealand. He's from Norway.
They've also found allies in Finland. Jussa and Jarmo are in contact with Matti Limotenian of Greenpeace.
Nyt näkyy. Entä sinne?
The Greenpeace activist is 600 kilometers away in Kemi, where there are 2 pulp mills. Matti wants to prove that they are using lumber from primeval forests that are vital for the Sami. Together with Jani, a photographer, he heads for a nearby lumber yard to gather evidence.
Yes, tätä mä tarkoitin.
The marks on the logs document the origins of the timber and the intended purchaser. The timber here comes from a company that the activists have already run across during their investigation.
Aika tukeva. This must be several hundreds of years old, so one might imagine that this might be coming from an old forest where you have trees with different ages.
The visit has paid off.
So now we know that in this one particular area where there's logging going on in habitats of red-listed species in old forest, the same number there and same number here. So logically it can't be any other than the first or the second company in Kemi pulping. So it's one of them. Now we know that.
The activists now know which companies are operating here. The guard arrives too late to intervene. The guard asks Matti what the 2 of them were doing and wants to know their names. Matti refuses, politely but firmly. The guard asks again, but he's not getting anywhere. Matti and Jani have the evidence they need. It's time to leave. There are 2 pulp mills in the area. They want to find out which one is using the old-growth timber. Wood pulp is a key raw material here. Wood and paper products make up a quarter of Finnish exports. Finnish timber companies are among the world's largest. The Metsä Group is one of them, but they can't get past the locked gates.
They are planning to build a new pulp mill here. It would be over 2 times bigger than the present one. It would consume 6.7 million cubic meters wood every year. If it would be trucks, it would be 400 fully laden trucks every day. It's an incredible amount. It's the sign of the pulp expansion in Finland currently taking place. There are plans to build 4 to 5 new pulp mills, some of them bigger than what we have previously had in this country. And the logging rates are going up, the wood imports, everything.
The company processes timber from Finland, Russia, Estonia, and Latvia.
Finland produced over 25% of all the printing papers, magazine papers in the world. And still we have only 2% of the forest resources of the world. So it tells on intensity.
Chinese investors are already financing new factories.
There's an increasing demand for pulp, and it looks like that currently it's mostly because of cardboard. So when people are buying things online from shops like Amazon, they are being packed in the cardboard. You get it to your home and then you throw it away. And that's bad for climate, and that's bad for everything.
Germany is still the biggest consumer of paper products from Finland.
Any paper or wood products you buy, if it comes from Finland, it might involve problems for the reindeer herders. It might involve problems with biodiversity. And I think that people should be more conscious. Let's think more what they use.
In France, Susanna and Pierre are investigating a promising idea. Sustainable houses made entirely of wood. When they're built well, they can be very long-lasting. They have an appointment with architect Peter Bloch.
What's that?
It's a portable home. You can live in it, and if you meet someone, a girlfriend, you can put a second one right next to it. If it doesn't work out, you just take them apart again.
This is the design? Everything we see here is wood from the Avenir forest. We're really proud because we know where our raw material is being used. The wood is storing CO2 and it's being used locally.
When wood is used for construction, it binds CO2 longer than if it's made into paper. The architect has a new commission for them.
I need you.
Do you need Douglas fir?
Yes, along with other kinds of wood.
Right.
Otherwise, it all looks the same. Aspen would be fantastic for the cladding.
We'll get quite a bit out. It should be enough for the house.
We'll get about 300 cubic meters. Just tell us how much and what kinds of wood you need.
You'll set it aside.
I'll reserve it for you.
300 cubic meters, that's 200 milled. So 140 cubic meters?
A local buyer and no middleman. Susanna and Pierre are pleased with the results. Using the wood sustainably is important, but so is the way that the trees are logged. In Lübeck, they'll be felling some old oaks today. It's a job that requires a fair bit of skill. They're planning to fell this tree. A cherry tree is in the way. They debate which direction the oak should fall to minimize damage to surrounding trees. It's tight quarters. They're hoping to spare a nearby oak. But the beech tree will have to come down. The foresters try to do as little damage as possible when they're felling big trees. The young trees nearby could easily be uprooted. Knut Storm carefully selected the oaks that will be felled today. They only harvest trees that will command a good price. The forester's long-term plan is to double the amount of oak in this forest, and he's well on the way.
When an oak comes down, I feel like I can hear it scream. That may sound nuts, but an oak is a living being, just like an animal. We need to treat them with care. A cat eats a mouse, and we humans need wood. But it pains me every time I have to kill an animal or a tree to meet my own needs.
The loggers are still debating how to fell the tree. The oak is a heavyweight, and it's tilted slightly in the wrong direction. The loggers are using a winch to guide it in the other direction. Nothing is rushed here, but the forest still earns the city a tidy profit. Now the trainee is given a recap.
You might wonder if all this effort was worth it. The oak was already tilting, and we could have just let it go down in that direction. But those young trees are the future of this forest. The next generation also want to sell high-quality wood. This tree has been here 200 years, so we should respect that and take the time to do our job properly. We don't want to just yank it down, we want it to fall in the right direction.
Even though there's sometimes collateral damage, this forest is densely wooded and thriving. The Lübeck forest draws customers from far and wide. These buyers came from Münster, more than 300 kilometers away. They want high-quality oak for their veneer workshop. The cubic meter price depends on the wood's quality. The price of every log is negotiated separately. One of the buyers points out a flaw in this section of the trunk. He's aiming for a good price. But Knut Storm stays unruffled. He's used to these kinds of negotiations. The buyers are also debating exactly how much of the log to purchase. What they'd prefer is 3 meters 50, with a minimum of knots. For that, they'd be willing to pay a premium.
600 and it's yours.
Well, that was painless. What if we take 660 for 300?
That's not enough.
In the end, they buy several truckloads. The price is a trade secret.
The way Knut Sturm runs this forest is pretty much unique in Germany. They let the trees get old and fat. You won't find trees this size in places where they fell the trees much sooner. Here, the trees grow old and sturdy. That's what we want.
It's a niche market, but a lucrative one. The customers are also willing to pay a premium because they know they're not getting illegally harvested timber.
That's what makes German forestry appealing. It's not like Romania or Ukraine. When it comes to observing regulations, they're too lax for our taste.
Johannes Tsanen of the Worldwide Fund for Nature and Alexandru, a Romanian police investigator, are heading out to take a look at illegal logging practices in the area.
They drove us quite far away to show us illegal logging. Then they said, "Oh, it's not that bad really. There's no illegal logging anyhow. Everything's great."
And everyone denies there's illegal clear-cutting in the area. They feel like they're being stonewalled.
Well, that's an example, all right.
They're told only a handful of trees have been felled, and there's no clear-cutting. Alexandru is frustrated with the local police. Johannes takes a sample of the wood.
This is illegally logging?
I've taken a specimen so that we can send it to the isotope lab as a reference. If illegal timber turns up, we can compare it to this sample.
Johannes Tsanen isn't just an activist. He's also a specialist in wood forensics. He helped develop this investigative technique. He's used it a number of times to prove that supposedly legally felled wood was actually illegal timber.
Yes, here, and that's fresh, and that's...
Do you see anything there?
Just over there, really large clear cuts.
We have to go forward 30 minutes because there it's something like that, he said.
Okay, let's continue. Come on.
As they hike up to the peak, Johannes talks to the local police officers.
Nearly every road that crossed the street, there were logs. So logging is everywhere.
Yes, but
so how to check them? How to control them?
Maybe they have authorization for that.
Yeah,
they
sure.
have papers.
Yeah.
99% have papers.
After a 2-hour hike uphill, they finally arrive at their destination. Most of the logging here is clearly older, but a few of the trees were felled recently.
It's close to a clear cut, what we can see here. Foresters told that they stole around 1,000 trees in this area. We have foresters badly paid. And if you go to the houses of the foresters and they have big houses, how can you have a huge house when you earn only very little money? It's an indicator that something is wrong.
Our experience was rather mixed, almost amusing at times. Clearly, they didn't want to put Romania in a bad light, but with all the illegal business going on there, you'd need an awfully big blanket for that cover-up.
Tsanen says the main problem is corruption. That's why he and his fellow activists have taken up the fight to save the forests. Knut Storm has also seized the initiative. Together with Torsten Welle of the Natural Forest Academy, he wants to refute the claim that young conifer forests bind more CO2 than older mixed forests.
I'll set up the laser scanner. This is the center of the area we want to scan.
Storm is convinced that mixed woodlands grow faster and bind more CO2 than most researchers believe.
We've got a mixed forest with trees of different ages. Our theory is that enhances growth.
Knut is setting up the balls, the reference balls.
The 3D scanner shows how much the trees have grown since the last measurements were taken.
Now I'll press the button and it will measure everything. The device is always the same height, at chest level. It makes fewer errors than a human would because people make mistakes every now and then. This gives you solid data that you can report. You get numbers, measurements, that you can show people. International studies have shown that a high level of species diversity, a large variety of trees in a forest, enhances productivity and growth. That's exactly what we see in Lübeck. This forest isn't unique. This is how ecosystems work. And it would be nice if forestry operations were to take that on board.
Knut Storm hopes that one day he'll be able to convince his critics.
The numbers are on our side, and not just our economic balance sheet, but the ecological data. We're seeing species return to our forest that only live in primeval forests, including insect, bat, and bird species. That's quite a success.